Hi, I'm Gerben.
Hi, I'm Oscar. Gerben, you have something about Security Center today?
Yes, so I actually want to talk about security and security in the cloud. Because what I see in my practice as a pen tester, I do some pen testing.
Security is important.
Security is really, really important. But what we see is a shift from security-related problems that originate in code to security problems that may originate in configuration, because more and more of the workload shifts to Azure or other clouds, but Azure in general. And configuration is really important. And we also need to have a good overview of that configuration, and also because in Azure it's really easy to create a new resource, create a new virtual machine. A developer can do it. Anybody who has access can do it. So we need to maintain a good overview.
Okay, but in pen tests, it was normal to just look at the code. But the configuration of these kinds of things now in the cloud world is included.
Yes. So as a pen tester, we also include, if the solution is in Azure, then we will include a cloud scan, because what we see in code, for instance, when you use functions or anything else, the business logic is really thin, so not much is added. We rely a lot on the framework, and we rely a lot on the Azure resource, so the configuration becomes really important. And what I want to show you today are actually two things. One is it's an open source tool. It's called Scout Suite, and we can scan all kind of cloud solution, but I will show you Azure. And then I will show you what Azure has to offer, especially its security center, and how we can get a grip on our configuration.
Okay, cool.
So let's jump into my screen. This is a tool, Scout Suite. It's an open source tool. It's Python based, but what you can see is that it supports multiple cloud offerings. And what it does, it just calls the API of the underlying cloud. And it has all kind of rules defined in JSON. I will show you just an example of it, how you could define your own rules, but it has quite a good rule set. Most of those rule sets are based on standards. So in Azure, we have the Azure Security Benchmark, and we have an organization called SIS, and they define all kinds of things that could be a potential problem.
Okay, but this should be then more generic, because it's targeting multi-clouds. We have different implementations of services.
Yes.
And different interfaces to reach those. But in the end, combining to one kind of rule set?
No, so you have a specific rule set for every cloud.
Okay.
But they implement the same benchmark. So I will just show you an example of how we can use Scout Suite and what kind of reports we have. I set up a configuration in Azure with some tweaks to make it a little bit less secure. So I hope we will find some things.
Yeah, it would be a boring demo without warnings, right?
Yeah, it is. Okay, so when we jump into Scout Suite, it's a Python program. So we first need to activate a virtual environment. Now we've done that, and we can run, let's see, we can run, it's going Python. We can run the Scout Suite script. We can run it local, so that means that for the first time it has to pull in all the resources. But what if we want to rerun it? Then we can add -- local, so it will run on the information that's already there.
So it's skipping the...
It's skipping, pulling everything.
It pulls in, through that interface, pulls in all the current setup.
Yes.
And then evaluates it locally. It's not actively going...
No. It's then evaluating locally. The -C is there because it's now interfacing via the CLI, so it means you first have to log in to Azure on the CLI client, and then you can use this. It will use your token.
Okay.
So let's run this. Wait. What's going wrong? think yes, now we will run. There it is. I was one directory too deep, but let's run it. So you can see now it's fetching all resources, and it's making a report out of that. Now I will just let this run.
But this is the default set. It will go through all the resources you have, or all the resources it knows, or how does
it knows. So everything that's defined in Scout Suite, it will get that one. So
are there big gaps in there? Services that are not covered?
That
you know?
Yeah, you can see on my screen. These are the services that already are in this tool. So, for instance, SQL or app services, virtual machine storage accounts. Things that are omitting are, for instance, things like IoT Hub, and that kind of stuff. That's omitted, but you could add them. I mean, because it's just using ARM templates, the ARM template language, to fetch and check all those resources.
Cool.
So I think it's finished now with scanning. So I will show you one of the things that I did with my storage account was I disabled the secure transfer, so it's not enforced. And you can see it's got a warning. You could also make it, for instance, that it's not a warning but an error, so you have a little bit of control in that. So you can see here that my storage account named the security policies. It should HTTPS should be required. So that's how this tool working.
Okay.
It's an open source tool.
And this is really interesting because a tool like this, because it's also multi-cloud. If you have a multi-cloud solution, and you want everything in one place during same standards, then you can bring everything together.
And you can just use this tool. But in Azure, we have a more integrated solution. Azure has some security solutions. One of them is Security Center, and they call it the baseline, the underlying base infrastructure. And on top of that, you could add things like Azure Defender, which is a more proactive solution, actively defending your machines. And we also have Azure Sentinel, which is more like a SIEM. So it collects events and it's more for the security officer. But I want to show you Security Center.
Okay, but this brings everything together that we have, because I see sometimes in my resources itself I get a suggestion or a warning or whatever, and that's all pulled into this one spot.
So we have one overview where we can see all recommendations, and if you sometimes a recommendation pop-ups. You can find it back here in the Security Center. What you have to be aware of the first time that you access the Security Center, then you have to activate the API. So only then it will start running on your subscription.
Okay, so if you never touch it, it's not there.
It's not there. No recommendations. So you have to go to the Security Center. Then you get a page and you have to scroll a bit to the bottom. And for the first time, you can just choose the free plan. Just skip, because Azure Defender is paid, but the Security Center, you can just enable it on your subscription. It's just there. And what you see here now on my screen, it's an overview of the resources. So you have a nice dashboard. You can see a security score, and it says something about all the assessments that it's making, and it's also making recommendations. So it's also giving you some guidance on how you can, for instance, fix it. You see I have 14 recommendations, and let's go to one. For instance, here it's saying that the function app should only be accessible over HTTPS. You see one of my functions. You can see what function that is, and you can also see a little description why this is important. And then you have the remediation steps. So you get a manual overview of what you can do to remediate it. But there's also some recommendations, not all. Some have a quick fix logic. And you will push that and it will go to your function and it will just fix it for you.
Yeah, like these are just toggles. So
yes,
I can imagine they're easy fixes.
Yes, what you could also do is, and it's grayed out now, but on some recommendations you can even trigger a logic app. So you can make a custom flow, for instance.
Okay.
What you also see, and there's also one thing that's important when you enable this, you see the freshness interval. It's not checked every time.
No.
So it also means that once you enable this, it will take some time for your resources to come in and to show up in this dashboard.
But they also will be there after you fix them for a while because of this, or not?
Yes. So it will, for instance, this one has a freshness interval of 30 minutes. So if you fix it now, it will take some time before it's removed from the dashboard and from the recommendations. What you could also do if for instance, you have a manual or another product who will fix this or remediate this, maybe you have, not in this case, but in other case you have other product, a firewall or something, you can also exempt this recommendation.
Yeah, so maybe it's like a false alarm, like because you fix this in a different way and you're really sure about it, and then you can just shut this up for a while. And you can give a reason why you toggle this. Okay, that's good. So the thing is still there and has a reason. So
yes,
very nice.
Yeah. So you can exempt something. Underlying on all the recommendations is actually the Azure Policy Framework.
Yeah.
So and the Azure Policy Framework is, like I showed you in the tooling, but then an Azure integrated way to assess and check your resources. It's a JSON-defined language. So for instance, when we look at this function app and this recommendation, we can see a JSON file and we can see a policy rule, and it just queries on the...
okay, so the built-in rules are exposed as a script, a JSON script, the language thing.
Yes.
And from that you can also take that and make your own.
Yes, so you can also define your own policies. Also good to tell that policies are grouped. So you have initiatives, which is a grouping of policies, and then you have the policies themselves. When you access Security Center, there is one default initiative already available. It's the Azure baseline.
Yeah.
And it defines the guidelines that are also in the standards. So it's the Azure Security Baseline, which is an Azure standard on what kind of things you should do. But there are also industry standards, for instance, CIS or ISO standards, so that you have compliancy with some of the regulatory authorities.
Is the baseline complying some of those standards already?
I don't know for sure. I think it's more of a combination of some of the standards, because what I know is that it, for one part, relies on CIS, so it relies on the CIS standards, but you also have the CIS standards itself, so you can also combine those things together. So that's how you define the policies and how they look. You can also find the policies in the Azure Security Center yourself. So if you go to Security Policies and then to your subscription, here you can see that the default initiative is assigned. If you want to add other industry standards, then you have to go to a more premium plan. So you can use the free. There is a 30-day trial on the Azure Defender.
Yeah.
And also if you look at my screen, when you press Get Started to give an overview of Azure Defender, in the Getting Started tab you can see the kind of resource you have and what it would cost you to proactively monitor these resources. Also in the Security Center you can have not only an overview of your recommendations, but as you can see on my screen, you can also have an overview of all the resources. And for every resource then you can see the recommendation, you can see the resource type, and when you click on them you can go to the specific ones. But I also want to show you the policy editor themselves. So this is the basis of Azure Security Center, is actually Azure Policies. Azure Policies is more broader than only security related. You could do all kinds of things. You can do naming schemes on resources.
Okay, so you like push conventions and
conventions, or that you should not be able to use certain resource groups or some or anything. You
can create a policy that and you filter your ARM definitions you have in there.
Yes.
And it will just say, well, this is compliant or not compliant. Yeah. And on top of that, they create security rules, and that's the security center.
Yes. And yes, so you can make it. You can make them that they audit. So they will only give a signal. Yeah. But what you can also do is to have deny rules, for instance, so that it's not possible to create.
Oh, so
create
actually in your create flow of your new resources, either doing that templates or in the portal, it will actually say, no, you're not complying.
Yes.
Oh, that's very cool. I'll definitely put that in place for some naming conventions sometimes.
And also what you can see here on my screen is I have enabled the Azure default. In the policies, you can enable some of the standard benchmarks, but will just not show up as a recommendation. For instance, the sys one, this one is a preview because it's the version 1.3. The stable one is 1.10, but I enabled this one. And it's the same, it's got all kinds of rules, all kinds of definitions. For instance, when we go here to the ensure secure traffic, this was the same one that we had when I show you the open source tool. You can then go to the policy, and this is the policy that is attached to this initiative. And when we click the policy, we can see that one of our resources, the one that was also flagged by our tool, is a non-compliant resource. And then we can go and fix that one. So Azure Security Center just gives you a broader overview of all your resources, and without having to dive in all your resources themselves, you can just get one overview, and you can get a better understanding of your whole security and security measures that you have to take.
This is amazing stuff. There's a whole world in there that I didn't know about.
Yeah, and it's all getting more and more integrated. So Azure Defender and Security Center and Sentinel, they're getting more and more integrated, and integrated also in when you create your resources, and it's getting a more and more packaged solution.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for this.
Yes, thank you.
I learned a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for watching.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.